So I'm going to talk about Engenia Herbicide, which is our new herbicide offer that we are developing for Dicamba tolerant cotton and Dicamba tolerant soybeans. And my talk today is going to focus on the cotton aspect, although I did have some questions after the last section. A lot of what I'm going to say here, particularly from the application stewardship, will be identical to soybean, and even some of the system stuff will coincide with soybeans as well. And if you get any particular questions about that, we can cover that. So, Engenia Herbicide is going to be the most advanced Dicamba offer from BSF that's going to be available. What we did was we spent considerable effort and time to identify a new and better salt to essentially eliminate volatility as a point of concern from an application standpoint. And we have been successful in doing that, and I'll show you some of that. We use an acronym to describe the salt, BATMA, and that basically just describes this chemical name here. One of our goals in developing the salt was that we wouldn't lose any control and none of the other advantages from a good handling standpoint, just from a formulation, and none of that would be negatively affected. And so we have been successful in that. It is still Dicamba. It works very, very well on broadleaf weeds. And from a handling aspect, we have been able to increase the loading in the formulation. It will be a 5 pound per gallon. You heard me talk about a potential use rate here in a little bit. But that will allow for a higher loading, lower use rate, less to carry around and have to handle in the field. So, two areas I'll focus on today. I will start off talking about weed management stewardship, and then I will wrap up with the on-target application stewardship that we'll be focused on. From a weed management side, it's really a couple of different areas. One, using the full labeled rate to make sure that we're getting the most bang out there. And I will definitely talk about this. This will be critical, especially when we talk about Palmer amaranth. So size will matter, and I've got an excellent picture that will show you that. So 4 inches or less is what we will target to get optimum activity. Some other weeds, like ragweed species, are going to be a lot more sensitive, but I have a feeling, considering how big of a problem Palmer amaranth is throughout the South and West, that's what we're going to have to target our programs after. The other area we'll talk about is using multiple sides of action to make sure that we're challenging these weed populations with something else other than just Dicamba, because if we abuse this one like we did with glyphosate, we'll have a resistance problem again. Also using residuals, and I'll go into some detail about that, and then I'll wrap up with the application stewardship. So this is the slide I was talking about, that size matters. This is from out in Texas. We had similar pictures here in the Mid-South and stuff, but these two plots were back to back and really told the story. So in the front here, this was an early post application when the Palmer amaranth was about 2 to 4 inches tall. 8 days later, all right, and we all know if you've got Palmer amaranth, you know how quickly it can grow. 8 days later, it was 10 to 14 inches. And you can see the difference in the amount of control. So it will make a difference, and that can change very quickly. So we look at these up close. I think one good way to look at this, if you got your credit card or if you take your hotel key card home, it's about 3 inches. All right? So if you want to target an application, that would be really optimum, because within another day it's going to be 1 inch tall once it gets some size on there and it's got moisture. 8 days later, this is what those weeds look like. So timing of application will be really critical, and that ties into my next point, and that would be the use of residuals that we have down. And for two different reasons there, which I'll cover on the next slide. As you can see here, timing this application, these weeds are probably already beyond where we want to be, and here you've got some time. And the reason we want to do that is for two reasons. One is we want to eliminate that early season competition. I heard a number of people, I think Bob Scott talks about this, when's the best time to see a Palmer amaranth in the field? Never, right? So having a good residual foundation down eliminates that early season weed competition. The other thing it does is it allows you a wider window to make that post application. And considering how timely we need to be on the weed size, it's not as limited as, say, a post PPO or Liberty, but it still is going to be something we have to keep in mind. This is a field trial that we had in North Carolina, and Obviously, this is a very extreme situation, but I can tell you I've seen Palmer amaranth populations out in commercial fields that are this bad. And just going total post, at an early post timing, I think the cotton was 2 to 3 leaf, we had 46% stunt when this evaluation was taken. You wait to mid post, obviously way too late. You didn't get any control. You got 63% stunt. This plot was tabletop, cleaned, after that post application was done. But by the time this picture was taken, we had a new flush come in. Here, we've got a Prowl Reflex program down pre, and then following up early post with Engenia, Outlook, and glyphosate, and we've got a near a tabletop clean field, and that's where we want to be. So just to go into some of the research results we had from this past year, this is from 15 locations, starting in Lubbock, Texas, and going all the way to just east of Raleigh, North Carolina. And I'll set this up, my next two slides are identical, so I'll set this up and what we're looking at. This is Palmer amaranth control 4 to 8 weeks after the mid-post application. So pretty late, really late in the season. So we've got a solo application of glyphosate, and we will build the program as we go. So here's two total post applications, one at mid-post, one at early post. We can see that the difference here is that once we got to this timing, those weeds were so much bigger, we just never got them in the first place. This, we probably got all of them that were there, but we've had a new flush come in. Now, as we build in a Prowl pre-program, now I say a program because it varied on the site. Typically out in Texas, they used just a straight Prowl program. In the Mid-South, we used Prowl Tolerant, and in the Southeast, we used a Prowl Reflex program pre. All right, but Prowl was part of that program. Then we followed up with glyphosate Engenia with no additional residual in with the post, and it's done really quite well. But that's quite a few escapes, actually. Now, if we layer in an Outlook, which is our pre-emergence graminicide residual that we use for pigweed control in corn and soybeans, we layer that in post, and we're getting an incremental residual control that's really starting to excel. Next, what we did was we came back with a third application. And this is a lay-by application, so post-directed with Engenia Herbicide, and it was with Liberty, and then I think the western sites used some Diuron in there as well. But the common thing was Liberty and Engenia in there. And then Engenia really provides the foundation of residual for the rest of the year. And we can see that we've reached just really excellent control by that point. Now, obviously this is very intensive, and it's going to take some effort to do that. What I would say, between these I would never want to be total post, because you're going to put a lot of selection pressure on the Engenia, plus potential elude. If you get rained out, you just may miss things. But between these three programs, having the residual down is key. And then based upon what you expect from a weed pressure, I'm sure if you're a grower, if you've had a real bad Palmer amaranth problem last year, you're going to have a heck of a problem this year. Then I would lean towards going this way. Now, once we get these populations under control, then we can start backing off. But I would really tailor to the weed pressure that you expect in the field, that program. Yeah.
None of those had Liberty.
The lay-by did.
Had Liberty?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
I think all of the sites. No, it was Liberty Engenia or a glyphosate Diuron Engenia.
Okay.
Yeah.
But not Liberty with Engenia on the top.
No. We did have that in some testing, which I can touch on later. I just didn't highlight it here. Another weed that we need to think about is morning glory. Okay, this is one that continues to plague us throughout the South. It was when I was in grad school 25 years ago, and it still is a problem, and it's never been a forte for glyphosate. No true resistance that I'm aware of. It's just inherently has always been weak on morning glory, and this is what I would typically expect in kind of the 70% range. Again, these are taken very late. We can see a little bit of a bump here with the mid-post just because we're putting it out so much later, and we will get some residual control out of the Dicamba, but with a lot of rainfall, which we had a lot of these sites, it's going to be pretty short-lived. Now, again, as we start building in the pre's or the three-way, we see a very similar trend. And again, designing the program that will fit the field is what's critical here. Okay? Now I want to spend just a little bit of time highlighting one location because I think it just tells a great story. This is from the Agri Center, which is about probably less than 5 miles just east of here, where we do quite a bit of our work, and he's got a very nice population of glyphosate-resistant Palmer amaranth. Now, as a weed scientist, it's a good thing. As a grower, it's not a good thing, but as a weed scientist, it's great to do work on. So what we did, and I'll just describe the treatments, we had the solo glyphosate, which always gives us an indication of the level of resistance that's in that given study area, and you can see it was pretty high. Then he had a separate treatment here, kind of a competitive program, I call it. He had a pre-program down, and in this case it was Tolerant, and he followed up with glyphosate Liberty Dual, and then that late post timing of Liberty Warrant. And that did very good. This is at 7 weeks after planting. You can see that our total post programs, the early post has done a lot better here just because it cleaned everything out and you just got a new flush coming. This never controlled what was there because it was just too big. Now we got to two, what I call BSF programs. You got the same pre-program in both, and then you're coming back with glyphosate Engenia Outlook, or as I described earlier, in this case, this was a Liberty Warrant as a lay-by treatment. And we can see that this program and this program have excelled. They're doing very well. This is not bad. But you look at 11 weeks after planting, you can see that these continue to do well, and you just see a drop in all the other treatments, with essentially here not being able to rate any control. So we took yields at this site. The highest yielding treatment was this three-pass program here. And so if we put that on a percent basis, based the percent of the others on that, we see that this program was 88% of the yield here. The three-way competitive program was 92%. Now why that drop? Well, he had another weed present there, and it was morning glory. We saw much better control with this program, with a Dicamba-based program versus just a straight Liberty. Particularly as weeds get large with Liberty, we know it gets much more side sensitive. All right, just one beauty shot here. This is from Lubbock, Texas, and here's your Roundup Power Max. Now, you look at this and you think, well, they got a train wreck. Well, they kind of do, but the population actually isn't too high. It's just what's escaped there has gotten really big, which it can. Here is a Roundup Engenia early post. Some of these were just a little too big at the time of application or came up after the application and the residual ran out, and you've got some that have escaped. So here we're just adding the Outlook in now with that combination, and now we're seeing much better, but we still missing a couple that were probably a little too big at the time of application. Now we layer in and have the Prowl Pre, come back early post with this same program, and now we're talking about a tabletop field, clean as a whistle. So now I'm going to transition into the application stewardship side. As I mentioned earlier, we've spent a lot of time in identifying a new salt, but a lot of people forget we've been in the Dicamba business for, well, it's been sold since 1964, so right at 55 years now, or 51 years. And so our first one we released was, Dicamba was first sold in 1964, believe it or not. I was involved, actually, I'm dating myself, I was involved in the development and launch of Clarity. And that's where we developed DGA, the diglycolamine, as a new salt. And that was a step change improvement. But with Engenia, we've been able to make another step change improvement. And I'll show you how. So this is what we call a humidome. So it involves a tray, just a plastic tray with a cover, and it's basically an airtight system. What we'll do, and if you can see it, there are glass petri dishes. These are basically just glass dishes. We'll take those into a spray chamber and spray the various treatments on them. Let them sit just long enough to dry. Take those, put them in the bottom of the tray, and then take these soybean plants and put in there, and then cap it and let it sit in the greenhouse for about a day. And believe me, this is a greenhouse within a greenhouse, right? So it's getting pretty hot in here. Matter of fact, they had to kind of optimize this early on because they were trying to leave them in there 2 days and it just cooked the soybeans. So, but it really is a worst case because there's no air exchange. So any dicamba that's going to come off that plate, that soybean's going to seep, right? So here are the results. So with Banville, you can see that we've had a pretty significant effect here. It's got a high enough dose that you're actually seeing some epinacity to stem and that terminal's drooping, right? A typical plant growth or auxin agonist response. With Clarity, you can see we made a big change or big advancement with Clarity, but we don't see the stem effects, but we can still see some cupping of the leaves, particularly this new growth coming out. And with Engenia, it's basically no different than the check. So with this formulation advancement, we've really, I think, hit a home run. So the key is we've got to ensure that when the application made is that the treatment actually makes it to the target, which is our weeds. So we're still waiting EPA approval, but this is how we think that our application recommendations will be. One is nozzle. If any of y'all have ever heard me talk before, I will harp on nozzle because if there's one thing you can do to manage an on-target application, it's selecting the right nozzle. If you don't have the right nozzle, you'll never get there. So here we're going to be requiring extremely coarse to ultra coarse droplets. Probably going to be a TTI or a Turbo T air induction nozzle is what we will be recommending. Boom height will be 24 inches or less to target. The reason for that is when you're releasing that spray from here to say 24 inches, then it's going to work really well. If you double that, you will double the distance of movement of whatever fine particles are produced. It's almost a direct relationship. Wind speed, 0 to 10. Remember earlier I talked about needing that extra window for the application. If you're trying to find a 0 to 10 day to apply, and believe me, we got it made in the South compared to the guys up in the Midwest, is we're going to have to be able to pick that day to spray too. So that's why we need that window of application. The one restriction on the 0 is, and it's going to be 0 to 3, is that if you have a temperature inversion, it'll say do not apply. Application volume, 10 GPA. There will be setbacks to sensitive areas. Those, I don't know what those are going to be yet. That's going to be defined by rate. Additives. So we will likely end up with an approved list of tank mixtures, both from an adjuvant and also a herbicide standpoint. There will be a restriction for no ammonium salts or no acidifying water conditioners. The reason for that is that both of those things, if you remember I talked about the salt. The salt is what's controlling or eliminating the concern for volatility. If you introduce a whole lot of ammonium salt, you change the salt balance. And then you can go to a more volatile form. So we don't want those in there. Right, so that's the reason for those restrictions. The acidifying water conditioners will drive the pH down. One of the advancements with the BATMA is it's also a larger salt, so it's like an anchor. But the other thing is it has a much tighter affinity. But as soon as you drive the pH down or you introduce those salts, you change that balance. So that's why those will be restricted. Sprayer clean out, it'll be use a detergent-based commercial cleaner, triple rinse, and then no aerial applications. So this is why I talk about nozzle. I don't know if any of y'all have seen these in the field. We've done these in the field in various tours, but what we have is it's called a static nozzle demonstration. It's just a great way to demonstrate the effect of different nozzles. We'll get on the edge of the soybean field. We'll wait for the wind coming out from, say, our backs. If the soybean field's in front of me, we'll wait for that wind to be usually 8 to 10 miles an hour. It makes for a good demonstration. And we'll have however many different spray booms, different people standing there, and we'll blow a whistle. They'll spray for 15 to 20 seconds, and then you can look at, you come back 2 weeks later and you can measure the distance of movement in the soybeans based upon the response. So we always put the XR nozzle in there as a worst case, and believe me, when you use one of those, it can move. So to get these normalized across all these locations, we just take that as the worst case, and everything else is a % of that movement. AIXR, I think that was introduced in the early 2000s, was a really nice, a really great advancement in nozzle type for managing spray drift. And it did work pretty well. We got about a 30% reduction on the average. But if you'll notice, this indicates where those data points landed, and you'll notice it was rather inconsistent. With the TTI, you can see that we reduced the distance of movement by about 70%, and you know it's very consistent. So that's why we'll be probably leaning towards that TTI nozzle. So with that, that's all I got. We will have that two-pronged approach, my required legal language since we're not registered yet. And with that, if you've got any questions at all, I'd be more than happy to answer them. Yep.
With the TTI, that's you call that a course or a barrel?
Ultra course.
That's ultra course, all right. You took the risk of drift completely out. Are you getting the same weed control from that
Yes.
ultra course nozzle as you are from the
Yeah.
nozzle?
So it doesn't eliminate drift totally, as I mentioned,
Right.
but it does a great job
Right.
and we, like I said, we will have setbacks to sensitive areas.
Right.
There'll be a buffer distance.
No, I'm saying.
Yeah,
I'm saying-
understood. I know where you're
Okay,
headed.
okay.
And I probably should have just answered your
I'm
question
sorry.
instead of pontificating. So, the volume mean diameter on that is about 900 to 1,000
Okay.
microns. It's a big droplet. Yes, it's a big droplet. Yeah, you're throwing out rocks. So, we've done a lot of efficacy studies with it, and since dicamba and also glyphosate are both systemic, we have not seen any impact at all on efficacy, any reduction in efficacy. All those research trials I showed, all those are done with TTI nozzles. We make sure that all our field people are using those in any of the demonstrations so that we're actually looking at the nozzles that we're actually going to recommend. We've also done some combination work with Liberty,
Yeah.
and oddly enough, we haven't seen any impact at all. I would have expected to see some, but when I think about it from a broadleaf sense, dicamba's carrying the load.
Right.
Okay? I think that answers your question.
Yes.
Yeah. Do you have a question, or you were commenting? Big
about
droplets.
the microns.
Yeah, they're big. They're big.
Just take the tips out and spray.
Yeah. Not quite that big, but it's getting close.
The Outlook product that you mentioned?
Yes.
You're spraying that on the post application?
Yes.
Tank mixed with Roundup and dicamba?
Correct. So it is.
What is Outlook?
Outlook is our chlorocidamide, so it's in the same mode of or site of action as Dual and
I got you.
Warren.
It's a good product.
Yeah, it's a good product. Historically, we've not sold as much in the South. It's mainly been predominantly, and it's just how we started. It was a Midwest corn and
Okay.
soybean product up in
Well, I
Frontier.
heard of it.
It used to be Frontier, but now it's
Okay,
Outlook.
that's
Once
what
we
I-
had the resolved isomer, it's really good. So Outlook can go over the top. Sometimes you'll see some symptomology similar to what you'll see with Dual. My experience is it's maybe just a little bit less, but it's similar. Okay, occasionally you can get some speckling of the leaves and that type of
Similar to
thing.
do like, we always try to, if it's steamy, if there's
Yeah.
moisture on the dirt, we try to avoid spraying do. So
Yeah.
when, the
Right.
ground dries a little bit, then we don't see as much. Is
Right.
that
Yeah.
typical? Is that-
That-
Was that in your first over-the-top application?
Yes.
Early?
Yeah, now I talked about Zidua. Zidua is our brand new, it's not a chlorocidamide, but it's in the same site of action. It's a little different chemistry. We cannot go over the top in cotton, it has to go in the layback. Otherwise, if we could go over the top, we could put that early post and we'd be probably done for the year.
Yeah.
It's a great polymer
On your
product.
sprayers, where you running a pressure regulated boom versus the pulsing booms with those larger tips, have you seen any?
Good question. So, I haven't seen any issue with that. I will comment, and I invariably get this question, I did not get it this morning though. We cannot use pulse width with a TCI or any air induction nozzle, right? The Venturi effect, if you're
Right.
pulsing it, it doesn't work.
But it reduces drift by, I would say, 2/3.
We're looking at that as probably a next step, but the little bit I've seen from, we can take these things into a lab and you shoot a laser through the spray pattern and you can get a droplet distribution. With the TTI nozzle with an 04, which is probably going to be pretty common, we will be in the, say, 1 to 2% fine spray particles. That's less than 150 microns, 1 to 2%. With the pulse width, I think they're still up in that 6 to 8%.
Yeah, we run a number 10 nozzle in our pulse book,
Yeah.
so it's a lot larger.
Yeah. I didn't have the data in there because we didn't look at it with a TTI. We looked at it with another nozzle. I mentioned the boom height. To be honest, I'll tell you, that's the part that gives me gray hair. I think we can get people on the right nozzle. But as soon as and I see guys running out there with a sprayer that far off the ground, that's a long distance for the spray to reach target, and it will move.
I think your biggest problem is gonna be speed. They're
Speed
gonna
and-
wanna run 18, 19 mile an hour.
Speed and height. So that's why
And they're not gonna want a triple rinse.
they'll have to triple in.
I know, until they get,
They'll learn.
If they don't, they'll know that kind of
until
spray.
they get
Yeah,
the wet suit, then
that's
they'll
right.
start doing it.
But, I grew up in the South. I went to school in the South, and then I did spend a good bit of time in the Midwest. I started my career in industry in the Midwest. We treat over 10 million acres of corn up there. And what's the rotational crop in the Midwest? Soybean.
Yeah.
It can be managed. You gotta pay attention a little closer.
You didn't talk about soybean, I don't think, much of this? did you?
No, as I mentioned earlier, on the system, so in cotton, because it's not as competitive, I think in these real train wreck fields, you're gonna have to have 3 shots to be really effective. In soybeans, it's a more competitive crop, particularly if you're on narrow rows, you have a pre-down, you come back in with glyphosate Engenia, you have outlook in there with the residuals, that'll probably take you to canopy, you're probably good.
Thank you.
And I think there's another session in there for us.
Yeah.